Chapter Volume 233. Classified as Heaven's Core. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Old Xiao, don't be so impatient. Vice Principal Xia nodded. He looked at him and said, the more convincing it seems, the greater the importance we need to attach to it. Those on your end, aside from you, has anyone else noticed anything? No, the agitation on the chubby old lecturer's face decreased, but his voice was still fretful. Apart from I, Xiao Mingxian, who else would be so interested in these new students' detailed information? After a slight pause, he then thought of something else, adding, however, old Luo has already come into contact with Lin Shi, moreover even personally chose a watchman, which is why he should have already discovered what is strange about Lin Shi as well. That means we should be the only three who know about this. Vice Principal Xia chuckled. It's not a big deal, I'll look for old Luo in a bit. I will assign some people to revise everything regarding him before passing his information into your Milky Way Hall. The degree of confidentiality of this matter will be Heaven's Core level. Only then did the fat old lecturer Xiao Mingxian nod in satisfaction, calming down. After a slight pause, feeling like there didn't seem to be much else to talk about, he prepared to leave. However, after walking out just 2 steps, he suddenly paused again, turning around to look at the quiet-thinking Vice Principal Xia. Since he has this type of talent, together with the fact that he might not necessarily be able to become a windstalker, why don't we just directly make him a brave slayer, stop having him waste time with archery? Who says that he can only become a brave slayer and not a windstalker? Vice Principal Xia spoke out in opposition for the first time. Under the twilight glow, he looked at Xiao Mingxian in a profound manner, saying, even though his soul force aptitude isn't outstanding, do not forget, that Bao, when facing others at the same cultivation level, the power he can display won't be lower than a windstalker with Bian Lingen's talent. His soul force density should also support him in this endeavor. Apart from Brave Slayer and Windstalker, he might reach even greater heights. Xiao Mingxuan's bloated figure trembled again. He suddenly turned around, a bit unable to control himself. Don't tell me you think he has the chance of becoming a war god like Principal Zhang. However, that Bao, as a living person, we will always hold on to a bit of hope. Vice Principal Xia looked at Xiao Mingxian in a rather proud manner. Old Xiao, you've been a member of our academy for so long, when have you ever seen us not even try to retrieve the things we lose? Correct, that Bao has been lost in the hands of that man, but out of fear that we might assassinate and seize it, he hasn't dared show himself anywhere near Tongcang Empire's borders. Because of a Bao, a great general has been filled with fear, not daring to approach the borders. By leaving this Bao in his hands, we have suppressed him for 10 years. For us, this isn't something completely intolerable. This Bao, it is just that it is not time yet. When the time comes, we will naturally seize it back. The peak Vice Principal Xia and Xiao Mingxian had this conversation on, was called Heaven's Core Peak. Ever since that middle-aged uncle established unimaginable glory, seizing great mountains and rivers for Yunqin Empire, becoming Principal Zhang, this peak became a place only 13 people could enter. He didn't care about privilege, but he cared about reverence. Faith made one resolute, reverence bound the person. He used his own way of thinking to alter this Green One Academy, also altering the way many people looked at this world. However, as many people aged, as many people passed away, together with his own departure, right now, in Green One Academy, there were only 4 people who could enter this peak. Heaven's Core level, this was the highest level of authority in access privilege. This was to say, this special aptitude that was detected in Lin Shi's body, in all of Green One Academy, it would only be known by 4 people. Not long after Principal Xia and Xiao Mingxuan's conversation ended, the lecturers in the new student training valley underwent some slight adjustments. There were some lecturers who left the training valley, either heading to the other areas in Green One Academy or leaving Green One Academy to accompany some students in their practical training. Because these adjustments were extremely slight, moreover within a reasonable scope, it didn't draw any attention. The only one who had an inherent sensitivity to a bit of scattered data, possibly discovering that these lecturers had all previously come into contact with Lin Shi in the training valley, was Xiao Mingxian, someone who was one of the four to begin with. Xiao Mingxian, who had never set foot into the battlefield, had previously been designated by Principal Zhang as one of the 13 individuals who could step into Heaven's core. Apart from the many unknown contributions he made and his absolute loyalty to the academy, there was another important reason, which was his talent. According to Principal Zhang's judgment, if Xiao Mingxian wasn't in Ilao Peak's rear mountains serving as the main brain of the Milky Way, he could still take over the role of Yunqin Empire's vice head, someone who overlooked all of the 8 sector chiefs. No one would question the appropriateness of Principal Zhang's judgment, because if he said Xiao Mingxian could become the empire's vice head, as long as he formally proposed it, Xiao Mingxian would quickly truly sit on the empire's vice head position. Meanwhile, whenever he deemed someone worthy of trust, then that person would be truly worthy of trust. This was something that had never been wrong in the past 60 years' test of time. Meanwhile, this Xiao Mingxian, who had the ability to serve as vice head, his judgment from all of the data and experience he had accumulated, was that any matter, if one wanted to maintain an absolute level of secrecy, there was only one way, which was for all those who came into contact with the information to die. Since there was no way he could make all those who came into contact with it die, there was no way of making an airtight wall. If he didn't want this to be discovered by others, then there was only truly recording it, tampering with it a bit, and then deliberately misleading others. This way, even those who came in contact with the truth would produce incorrect judgments with his guidance. One more 5 emblem withdrawal and I can exchange for a course point. Seems like I really must be a bit more careful. That day, before he began his meditation cultivation, Lin Shi, who had once again tormented himself until his entire body was aching, unable to even lift a finger, thought this to himself. Meanwhile, he had no idea that even though no one in this world knew his and Principal Zhang's true secrets, those powerful individuals in Ilao rear mountains, through the comparison between fine details, already discovered his 2 bowls aptitude. Moreover, from this day forth, many things regarding him would be faithfully recorded, but some things would instead be tampered with by Xiao Mingxian through his unique methods. His special aptitude, in Green Yuan Academy, would forever only be known by 4 people. The Academy's sequence of processes would always be that fast and efficient. Brave Slayer. Only, the night Lin Shi began meditation cultivation, general merit level piece of information already entered Su Xinghua's hands. Brave Slayer candidate. Lin Shi actually has the talent in becoming a Brave Slayer. When he undid the flame lacquer sealed small sheepskin scroll, Su Xinghua's brows furrowed slightly, but the expression on his face didn't change that much. However, a bit of a haze suddenly flashed past the depths of his eyes. After silently tossing this small sheepskin scroll into the furnace in front of him, watching as this small sheepskin scroll was completely burned into a type of strange ashes, sticking to the red charcoal, the exceptionally ice-cold, smooth, and fair skin, Su Xinhua suddenly couldn't help but release a smile of ridicule. He, Tong Wei, and Xia Zhiqiu weren't the same type of people at all. However, right now, just like the ashes left by this small sheepskin scroll and the charcoal, merging together in a strange manner, regardless of the difference in opinions and way of looking at this empire, at this world, didn't they still have to shoulder the same mission? This really was a bit too ironic. Almost at the same time, a small sheepskin scroll recording the same contents entered Mu Qing's hands. A Brave Slayer with an aptitude of 2. Lin Shi, seems like you really are quite special. The instant she saw these contents, an expression that seemed a bit between laughter and tears immediately appeared on this outwardly mediocre female lecturer's face. While tossing this small sheepskin scroll into the furnace, this female lecturer's eyes stopped over a letter that was already opened before her. On the ordinary waxen yellow paper, there were gentle and beautiful words written in an extremely careful and neat manner. To my beloved son Lin Shi. Even though she hadn't read the contents of this letter, just from the handwriting alone, she could already picture how warm, caring, and compassionate the woman who wrote this was. This letter, if it was through normal postal speed, it would take another 5 days before it would reach Green One Academy, but because the academy just happened to have some people hurrying back from Dragon Snake Border Army, this letter arrived a few days ahead of time. When she thought about how this youngster from Deerwood Town would feel when he received this letter tomorrow, a beautiful smile appeared on the corners of Mu Qing's lips. Early the next morning, the lively Lin Shi still walked out together with Tang Ku, Bian Linghan, Hua Jiyue, and Li Kaiyun from self-defense freshman dormitory. For Lin Shi, today's toxicology elective course was one that tested one's patience, observation skills, and memory, this type of overcautious and unimaginative class. As long as he didn't make any mistakes, properly waited for the course to end, then he would obtain 2 points. However, what immediately filled the faces of all of these new students who walked out from self-defense freshman dormitory with shock, was that there were 2 black-robed lecturers standing outside the self-defense freshman dormitory in the first glimmer of dawn. Standing outside the entrance was lecturer Mu Qing, while standing next to a cliff not far from a silver-thread zip-line, was their strict martial skills course lecturer Su Xinmo. Your family sent you a letter. Because the academy just happened to have someone returning from Dragon Snake Mountains, this letter arrived a few days early. Without wasting much words, Mu Qing gently gestured towards Lin Shi, calling him over, and then produced a letter from Deerwood Town, placing it into Lin Shi's hands. Lin Shi was first stunned, and then he lowered his head slightly to look at the gentle and graceful handwriting on the waxen yellow paper's cover. He immediately became momentarily stumped for words, staring blankly for a long time. Sometimes, he felt like the heavens were cruel for him who had never experienced much love and affection to be thrown into this completely different world. However, sometimes, he felt like the heavens were benevolent and fair. Right now, in particular, he even more clearly felt what was called happiness spreading through his heart, experiencing that in this world, it was what he truly cared about. Pops, Mom, old sis, what are you all doing now? In his mind, he couldn't hold back the different scenes of Deerwood Town from pouring into his mind. This letter written on the waxen yellow paper, right now, completely filled his heart. Read it when you have some time later. The corners of Mu Qing's lips were slightly curled upwards, warmly looking at Lin Shi while reminding, Lecturer Su is still waiting for you over there. Chapter Volume 234. Falsified Reality. You are listening at novelfull.audio. He also came for Lin Shi. Why would he come for Lin Shi at this time? When they heard Mu Qing's words, Tang Ku, Hua Jiyue and the others all immediately frowned. In reality, after having a few martial skills classes, they could all tell that Su Xinhua didn't really like Lin Shi, this self-defense department's heaven's choice. Apart from often treating Lin Shi like empty air, Lin Shi was also often used as a punching bag to display martial skills. I don't believe I called any of the others here. While looking at Tang Ku, Hua Jiyue and the others who walked over with Lin Shi, Su Xinhua spoke in an ice-cold and mocking tone. Then, after giving Lin Shi a cold look, he nodded towards the silver-thread zipline next to him. Lin Shi's lips twitched as he looked at his good friends who were angry, but didn't dare speak out. After touching his sleeves, making sure that the letter was securely stored, he still gave Su Xinhua a respectful bow, and only then did he slide down the silver-thread zipline, still bewildered. This silver-thread zipline led to a valley filled with all types of rocks, not a single road to be seen. Su Xinhua floated behind Lin Shi like a black cloud, then stood in front of Lin Shi. While looking at the respectful and cautiously standing Lin Shi, he didn't hide his disdain at all, speaking with a similarly ice-cold and mocking tone, even though there is enough proof to prove that you have the talent required for becoming a brave slayer, I can frankly tell you that just like how Tong Wei thinks highly of you, I have never had a good opinion of you from the very start. You can never become a brave slayer. Those who can become brave slayers, which one of them are not proud and sharp like a blade? A yes-man like you, even if you do not like me inside, you still act so cautiously and respectfully before me. Even a letter from home can leave you absent-minded, like a little girl. Even someone like you is worthy of becoming a brave slayer. Even though I have accepted the Academy's arrangements, thus I will give you some essential Brave Slayer training, that doesn't mean that I acknowledge you, even more so doesn't mean that I like you, that is why there is no need for you to feign any respect before me. Also, I do not like Tong Wei either, which is why I do not wish for you to let Tong Wei know about the training I will have you undergo here. If you fail to do this, I will teach you some unforgettable lessons, moreover deduct some points. After a slight pause, Su Xinhua looked at the frowning Lin Shi who hadn't completely sorted everything out yet, and then said with an even colder voice of mockery, after all, even if I do not think highly of you, this brave slayer, is just like Windstalker, in the Academy, it is a secret few people have the authority to learn about. Lin Shi frowned once more. Him not liking Su Xinhua was fact. The very first time he saw Su Xinhua, he didn't see much gentleness and love towards life, this instead gave him not much of a good impression towards Su Xinhua. However, not liking him was not liking him, his respect and cautiousness wasn't faked in the slightest, but rather came from the teachings of his mother from Deerwood Town. Unknowingly, he had already developed the habit of treating all those who taught him things, regardless of what their attitudes were like, as superiors he had to respect. However, since the other party felt like he was faking it, then there was not much of a need to dispute anything, he naturally didn't have to maintain this type of respect either. Even so, under the other party's candidness, he still didn't develop much anger. Then what are brave slayers? You're saying that they are like Windstalkers, this type of identity cannot be revealed to anyone else either. After slightly sorting out his thoughts, he looked at Su Xinhua, moreover not with much formality. Su Xinhua didn't waste any words either, with a sneer, he said, to put it simply, brave slayers are existences who, when unleashing slaughter on a battlefield, their performances will vastly surpass all others of the same level of cultivation. These people will grasp the killing techniques I've passed on to you all even better. For the Empire's enemies, these people will naturally be those who are best eliminated earlier. If you want to die, then feel free to reveal this to everyone during a practical training outside. Could it be because my performance during the past few days has been too good? Lin Shi thought in a rather simple manner. There are two things over there, you should be able to tell their uses. Right at this time, Su Xinhua already turned around to leave, his ice-cold voice sounding. In the following month, you will come to this valley each morning before classes, and then bring these two things with you, keep them inside your clothes while heading to class, you are not allowed to remove them along the way. It seems like your breadth of mind really can't be much more narrow. After making his way through several dozen rugged mountain boulders, seeing the two items Su Xinhua was talking about, Lin Shi couldn't help but shake his head, releasing a sigh. The two things Su Xinhua spoke of, were a pair of leg weights full of heavy pellets, as well as a leather vest that had an inner layer, filled with mercury or who knew what type of especially heavy substance. The combined weight of these two items was at least 70 jin, more importantly, when moving, the liquid in the vest would move irregularly, so the weight might be concentrated at the left, and then suddenly shift to the right. This made it so that with each step, it was as if someone was hacking down heavily on his body, only after exhausting great strength could he maintain his body's balance, barely withstand the feeling of being struck. Increasing endurance and the ability to maintain one's balance even when struck or ran into, the uses of these two things weren't hard to imagine. However, just how much did Su Xinhua loathe Lin Shi, for him to not even be willing to personally hand them to him? Standing against Tong Wei and the others due to a fundamental difference in view on life, this was something Lin Shi could still understand. After all, even though some of what Su Xinhua proposed was a bit more cruel, the previous Lin Shi would rather believe that his intentions were good, standing against the others politically purely because he wanted to reduce the casualties of academy students as much as possible. However, to go so far as to loathe even a student someone of different political view favored, this really was a bit too petty and narrow-minded. In Ileo Peak's rear mountains, the thick bespectacled Xiao Mingxuan's hair was a bit sticky with sweat as he wrote in books at tremendous speed, one after another. The scrolls, books and letters were like a sea, completely submerging his bloated body. This oversized elder who looked a bit like Sammo Hung and never went to the battlefield, looked completely harmless, but not even the proud and conceited Su Xingmo, as well as the extremely intelligent Lin Shi could have imagined that there was an almost formless thread that was silently being controlled by him. They were just like chess pieces in Xiao Mingxuan's hands, used by him to complete the arrangements for the Heaven's Core level secret. The powerfully intelligent didn't need cruelty and blood. Just by finely manipulating and tuning the course of some things, even some emotional elements included in the calculations, Lin Shi's two bowls reality was concealed. If Lin Shi knew that someone who had the ability to serve as the vice head of all of Yunqin Empire dedicated a small half of his energy on him, he really wouldn't know whether to feel frightened or honored. The purer the child, the more they knew how to enjoy this world's joys, because in their eyes, everything in this world was new to them, worth seeing, worth exploring. This world, for Lin Shi, was also a new one, and together with a set of memories others didn't have, he looked at everything with much more fascination than the other students, the joys he experienced also greater. For example, lecturer Ouyang Yunsang, who was currently teaching toxicology on the podium, looked a lot like Guyu, if he had a head of sparse yellow hair and a somewhat thin and discolored beard. Each time he pictured that world's well-known master Gobald, and then stuck on a beard, comparing him to Ouyang Yunsang, he would always secretly laugh for quite some time. Ouyang Yunsang, who had no way of possibly understanding the amusement Lin Shi experienced, was an excellent-tempered lecturer, his words slow and extremely clear, but this didn't mean he didn't get angry. This very day, when he was sitting upright and still, giving a lecture, a hint of anger that was hard to disguise suddenly appeared on his face. With a pa sound, a paper ball shot out from his hand, hitting Lin Shi right in the forehead, leaving behind a red mark. Envied Lin Shi. His strict and enraged voice also sounded while many students turned their heads. In today's lesson, just this short half-hour or so of time, forget about the fact that you already dozed off twice, you are even peeping at something else. Don't tell me that you think this toxicology course is some child's play. Lin Shi rubbed his slightly aching forehead, putting his letter from home away in a slightly embarrassed manner. The vest and the two anklets Su Xingma left him with early this morning exhausted a large amount of stamina and soul force, and because this classroom was so cozy, he couldn't help but feel a bit sleepy. That was why he produced that letter from home, looking at it, trying to wake himself up a bit. Also, he really wanted to see what his old dad, mom, and sis from Deerwood Town wanted to tell him. It wasn't that he didn't want to properly pay attention in class. However, because these reasons were connected to the Braveslayer secret, moreover, these reasons were still excuses for this furious teacher, Lin Shi still decided to lower his head and admit his wrongs. However, Ouyang Yunsang's rage wasn't so easily quelled. He walked over from the front podium, through the students' desks, and then arrived in front of Lin Shi. During the very first lesson of toxicology, I have repeated 3 times that this course emphasized attentiveness and memory. There is not a single type of poison in this world that can become completely undetectable. However, a single slip-up, and the deadliness of poisonous matter will become much more vicious than even blades. That was why I repeated 3 times that in my class, one must be 100% serious, because your error and negligence might not only harm your own lives, it might also harm the lives of many of your companions. This is a matter of life and death. Ouyang Yunsang's finger pounded the desk in front of Lin Shi. Leave this classroom. The things you did in this lesson, you should clearly reflect over them in the introspection room. While looking at this Guyu, whose anger was hard to quell, Lin Shi didn't feel any amusement, knowing that regardless, this was his own mistake, and the other party's anger originated from how much he cherished the lives of his students and the Empire's soldiers. He stood up without any dissatisfaction, seriously giving Ouyang Yunsang a respectful bow, and then left this medicine department classroom, entering the reflection room in the corner. This was a clean and bright little room, the surrounding walls and decorations all a light green color, peaceful and extremely comfortable. On the wall opposite the door was a calligraphy painting. The one currently seated on a bamboo woven mat, facing this painting, was a medicine department female student dressed in gray robes. The female student's black hair was tied in a clean ponytail, which was why Lin Shi could see her fine, fair neck. Beautiful and gentle sunlight entered from the side window, the radiance not tainted by a speck of dust, just that pure as it landed on her body. Lin Shi's heart began to pound. He was in a daze as he stared at this female student basked under the pure radiance. He felt as if his brain became a bit sluggish, this scene freezing before his eyes, just like the time he first saw this female student by Summer Spirit Lake. 1. Chinese Actor. Chapter Volume 235. Simple way of thinking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. She just happened to be in the reflection room as well. This situation, for him, was a bit too dreamlike. However, her silhouette, the beautiful hair that cascaded down her back, the moving side profile, all of this told him that this was real. Why did you end up here too? The female student turned around, seeing Lin Shi who walked in, asking in a rather curious and lovable manner. I dozed off and secretly read a letter from home during toxicology class. Lin Shi shook his head, returning to a normal state. He looked at Gao Yanan in a rather embarrassed manner. What about you? Why are you here? Gao Yanan's brows furrowed in a rather vexed manner. Mine was more serious than yours, my movements too fast and careless. During compounding class, before teacher's son even finished explaining the preparation process, before he even said to begin, I already threw 3 types of medicinal herbs into the medicinal cauldron, starting to refine them. Are you always careless like this? Lin Shi couldn't help but laugh. Gao Yanan's behavior immediately made him forget about his previous nervousness. He sat down on a bamboo mat next to Gao Yanan in an extremely natural manner. Gao Yanan nodded in a serious manner. She didn't see through the other concealed emotions Lin Shi was feeling, only feeling like this Deerwood Town youngster who entered as Heaven's choice with her was extremely amiable, not bossy or domineering at all, which was why she also had a favorable impression of him. Only, she really was rather sloppy, which was why even she herself overlooked a problem. With her nature, normally, she definitely wouldn't speak this naturally with someone who she only interacted with a few times. However, she didn't exactly tell him everything either. The reason why her movements were so fast, was because she already knew how to prepare the medicine. There's no need to be scared of being wrong, what one should be scared of is not having the chance to correct the wrong. The now seated Lin Shi saw a line of words on the calligraphy before him. These words that were written in large black characters weren't particularly beautiful, but the meaning they contained made him tremble slightly, the smile hanging from the corners of his lips also slowly restrained. Rumor has it that it was written personally by Principal Zhang. Gao Yanan noticed the change in Lin Shi's expression. As her gaze shifted to the calligraphy, an expression of utmost respect also filled her eyes. Uncle Zhang, seems like this is also a result of your experience as a teacher. You've really poured quite a bit of your heart into this academy. Lin Shi stared at these words, becoming quiet. Another gray-robed medicine department female student entered this reflection room. This was a dainty and delicate female student, her face full of tears. She was crying, looking extremely pitiful. Jiang Yue, why were you also sent to this reflection room? Gao Yanan turned around, looking at this delicate and pitiful female student with a rather surprised expression, clearly confused. Jiang Yue was always the most obedient student in medicine department, extremely respectful towards the lecturers, also one of the students who studied the most earnestly in class. How did she end up angering a teacher as well? When this dainty and delicate girl was asked this, it seemed to have the opposite effect. This female student who gave off quite a bit of an innocent girl next door feeling began to cry even harder, extremely broken-hearted. I didn't watch the fire close enough, and so the burned ingredients released a puff of thick smoke. In the end, the teacher just also happened to be right next to me. I ended up making the teacher's face become completely black. Lin Shi and Gao Yanan both immediately couldn't help but burst out laughing. This medicine department female student immediately felt as if the world had become completely dark, feeling more and more like the teacher might forever bear a grudge against her, so broken-hearted that her two shoulders continuously shook. After trying to console Jiang Yuer a bit, trying to erase the negative feelings she felt, Gao Yanan looked at Lin Shi in a bit of a fretful manner, quietly whispering by his ear, "What should we do?" When Jiang Yuer first came in here, she didn't even feel that bad, but in the end, because of her own laughter, this delicate girl ended up like this. She couldn't help but feel a bit of indescribable guilt. As Lin Shi felt Gao Yanan's breath that was like the fragrance of orchids by his ear, his heart rate couldn't help but speed up. When he recalled how he would fool his old sis back home in Deerwood Town, while his body was in a state so stiff he didn't dare turn around to look at Gao Yanan, he said, "How about I tell you two a joke?" In the past, there was a mentally ill person with something wrong with his head. He would always squat in front of a store while holding up an umbrella. There were many housewives who wanted to help him, but he didn't pay anyone any attention. Later on, a rather well-known doctor thought, if I want to treat him, then I have to start by understanding him. As such, that doctor also propped up an umbrella, squatting right beside him just like that. A month later, this mentally ill person finally spoke. With some hesitation, he looked at the doctor and asked, You're also a mushroom." Jiang Yuer was still sobbing, feeling terrible, but Lin Shi was quite good at telling stories, so both her and Gao Yanan couldn't help but listen. When they heard the last line, "You're also a mushroom," her sobbing stopped, also unable to help but laugh with a pff noise. Perhaps because she felt like crying and laughing was rather shameful, this delicate and dainty female student became incredibly shy, not daring to even raise her head. Gao Yanan also laughed out loud. When she saw how Jiang Yuer's tears turned to laughter, she felt much better. While looking at Lin Shi's clean face, she also couldn't help but think, this self-defense department heaven's choice really was rather special. Lin Shi brought out his letter from home he had only seen a few lines of, now carefully reading it. Perhaps right now, in that toxicology class, there were quite a few people who were taking joy in his misfortune. However, what was there in this world that could make him feel more blessed than having the girl he admired right next to him, moreover able to calmly read a letter from home? The contents of the letter were extremely trivial things, regardless of whether it was the warnings to be careful when he was outside alone, the reassurance that everyone was doing well back home, or if it was just trifling information like which auntie just gave birth to another fatty, which family built a new house. It was precisely this trivialness that made him feel even more warmth. The 7 sheets of paper had 3 types of handwriting, he naturally knew that this came from 3 different hands. He read everything slowly and carefully. When he reached the last page, seeing the writing that was still a bit thin because of a lack of strength, the corners of his lips even more so couldn't help but curl up. "Old bro, I just knew that you were great, that you'd definitely enter the academy. However, this isn't a very happy thing for me. I don't know how long it will be before I can see you again. Big Lin and Little Lin are both growing very well, but Mom said that we still have to let them leave after a while, that keeping them inside of cages isn't good for them. Old bro, I dreamed of you again last night. When will you be able to come back? I received a letter from home today, even met her. I might as well change the 4-5 emblem achievement into a 5-5 emblem achievement, exchange for a course point, right? Brave Slayer, didn't Su Xinhua say that it's impossible for me to become a Brave Slayer? If I end up doing it better than anyone else, wouldn't he be so angry his nose becomes crooked? Lin Shi felt extremely fulfilled, thinking all of this extremely happily. His thoughts were extremely simple. He wanted to become stronger as fast as he could. Also, if anyone made him feel bad, then he would make them feel bad too. Compared to before he entered Green One Academy, Lin Shi already learned about many things he didn't know about before. He knew that the middle-aged uncle was a tourist just like himself, knowing that Yunqin Empire wasn't as calm as it seemed on the surface, also knowing that if he obtained another course point of reward, he should have the qualifications to break into the initial stage Soul Knight level. At that time, he would be able to easily raise a stone sphere weighing 100 jin, the black stone power bow also no longer that taxing for him to use. However, He still had no idea who that high official who recommended him to Green One Academy, the one whose carriage passed by Deerwood Town that day, was. There was even less of a chance of him knowing that during this radiant morning, in the southern parts of Yunqin Empire, dark clouds loomed over Rudong City, a place 2,400 or so li away from Deerwood Town, rain continuously drizzling down in this city. The delicate and pretty young lady who had interrogated him seriously in Deerwood Town was currently earnestly driving a carriage that already had its wheels replaced, advancing through a bumpy and muddy path, heading eastward towards Rudong City. There was still half a day of travel left before they would reach Rudong City's gates. Under this overcast and drizzling weather, Rudong City's outline couldn't even be made out. In this young lady who was seated at the front of the carriage's line of sight, the only sign of activity was an herbal tea shop with a pergola built in front of the entrance. In this type of chilly weather where a double-layered coat was essential, there was naturally not much business to do, which was why this shabby shop that didn't have a signboard was also closed. However, there was an extravagant carriage stopped under this shop's pergola. A round-faced, slightly chubby official dressed in a prune-colored uniform and a private assistant-like, green-clothed scholar were sitting on the slightly damp wooden stools, waiting. When they saw the carriage driven by the delicate and pretty young lady appear in their line of sight, the official immediately stood up in an extremely respectful and sincere manner. He sorted out the official uniform he wore, and then without any regard for the wind, rain and mud outside the pergola, began to welcome this carriage. The private assistant-like green-clothed scholar immediately followed as well, opening an oil paper umbrella, holding it above their heads. While seeing his own white-bottomed imperial shoes and official uniform become stained a vile color by the mud, a bit of revulsion couldn't help but appear between the official's brows. However, when he thought to himself, realizing that he didn't necessarily have to ever walk through this type of place again, didn't have to wear these things, his mind immediately felt relieved, the corners of his lips even producing a calm smile. The carriage didn't stop, almost as if this official and green-clothed assistant didn't even exist in that young lady's eyes. The official and green-clad assistant didn't stop either, only when they were less than 50 steps away from the carriage did the official bow deeply, greeting the carriage. "This humble Li Qilong has come to respectfully welcome your majesty. This humble one never expected to have the honor of being in Her Majesty the Princess' beautiful presence in this life." The carriage stopped, the two low-footed old horses kicked the dirt restless. A voice full of mockery and icy arrogance said, "Li Qilong, you actually planned to welcome me with just this amount of people?" Li Qilong straightened his body, looking at the carriage stopped in the middle of the muddy path through the curtain of rain. The respectful expression on his face was meticulous, only a hint of excitement hidden within his eyes. Yunqin Empire's officials, high or low in status, all know that Her Majesty the Princess is a powerful cultivator. However, as for just how strong your Majesty is, no one has personally witnessed it. Today, I actually wish to test things out a bit. Under the heavy dark clouds, rain began to pour down even harder. From the forest behind him, a famous swordsman holding a border army long blade and a black cloth-masked swordsman silently walked out. As countless raindrops splattered across the long blades and black steel armor, the finer water droplets were like smoke and mist. Chapter Volume 3:1 Rudong Chaos. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The carriage still didn't move. The young lady at the front of the carriage didn't show much nervousness either. Meanwhile, a calm, yet ridiculing voice transmitted out from inside the carriage. "Li Qilong, as a city supervisor, you naturally know that any attempts of assassination directed at me are a crime deserving of execution of all your relatives. You do not care about your own fate, but could it be that you wish for all of your family members to accompany you in death too?" Li Qilong smiled gently. "There is no need for your Majesty to worry, this humble one's family members have already been properly tended to. Is it the southern Great Mang dynasty? It seems like the one who incited you to do something like this gave you some kind of a promise. Perhaps you were promised an even better position down south." The voice from within the carriage was filled with even more ridicule. Indeed, if you succeed here, you still have a chance of fleeing south from here. However, if this type of thing took place within Yunqin Empire's borders, how much resentment and anger do you think you'll have to shoulder? Forget about my Yunqin Empire's great army suppression, even the so-called Great Mang Dynasty might disappear overnight. Do not forget, if we want to kill, it doesn't necessarily have to be within Yunqin Empire's territory. You are merely a defected city supervisor. How many elite experts do you think Great Mang Dynasty will dispatch to escort you and your loved ones every day? Will they be able to stop my Yunqin Empire's powerful assassins? Were you born stupid, or are you just unwilling to confront these key points? Li Qilong's round face twitched, forcefully calming himself down. From today forth, Li Qilong has already died. Regardless of whether he was killed by you in retaliation after being found guilty of conspiring assassination, or whether he was killed by assassins while protecting you, from today forth, he has already died on this road. No one will know that he is still alive. Not even the most powerful assassin will chase after someone already dead. The carriage remained silent for a moment, and then a voice sounded again. You really are still too lacking in the end, your official rank too low, the people you've come into contact with limited. This is why you all are being toyed with like chess pieces in this game of politics. It's not something you are able to understand at all. Her tone was extremely flat, but these calm words instead carried a disdain that made Li Qilong feel completely inferior. It was as if he was but a chicken before a proud peacock, moreover one who was standing in mud, stomach sticking out a bit, a chicken that had half its body drenched. Normally, he might not even feel the slightest bit of dissatisfaction, yet today, his round face twitched involuntarily again, his chubby fingers joints releasing cracking noises. He stared at the carriage, a nasty grin on his face as he said in a strange pitch, born in the imperial city, dragon blood flowing through your veins, so what? My social status is too low, so what? Aren't you still going to die under my hands today? My name is Li Qilong, but today, I am going to rename myself to Dragon Rider Li, going to ride your body. No voice of response sounded again from the carriage. The rain poured down with increased ferocity, water splashing everywhere as the raindrops struck the carriage, water splattering on Li Qilong's face. His completely soaked right hand was shaking slightly. Kill her. Suddenly, he released a fierce shout. Following this fierce shout that was like that of defending a city, several hundred armor-plated masked swordsmen silently closed in on this carriage from all directions. However, the first ones to reach the carriage weren't these black cloth-masked, cold-bladed swordsmen, but rather the black arrows fired from the forest. Following the sounds of bow strings vibrating, densely packed black arrows shattered countless bamboo leaves, carrying air-shattering screaming noises as they pierced through the rain, instantly descending upon the carriage's surroundings. The two short-footed horses and the carriage itself immediately became porcupines, bloody streams moving along the mud and rainwater. The young lady previously at the front of the carriage was nowhere to be seen. Before the arrows rained down, she had already swiftly opened the carriage door, making her way inside. The power of these black arrows were all above those fired by Lin Shi, yet even though these arrows that impaled the horses covered the carriage, not a single one could penetrate through. Under a creak noise, the entrance of the carriage, now a bit crooked from the death of the horses, opened up again. A white-clothed woman with thick, beautiful hair coiled up walked out. This white-clothed woman had a bit of a tired expression on her face, some wrinkles also appearing at the corners of her eyes. She wasn't extremely slim, her chest also not especially large, her features normal. However, this woman who wasn't all that stunning, the moment she appeared, all of these swordsmen who were used to seeing bloodshed, as well as the several dozen cold-blooded and ruthless archers hidden in the forest's movements became a bit sluggish. It wasn't because of this white-clothed woman's appearance, nor was it because she was a cultivator, but rather because of her status. Just from this Li Qilong's assassination attempt on her alone, one could see that Yunqin Empire faced troubles both domestic and abroad, powerful enemies nibbling away at them outside, constant acts of aggression internally. However, even with all of these internal and outside turmoil, Yunqin Empire was still this world's most powerful empire. In other words, Yunqin Empire was single-handedly resisting Tangshan country from the west, repelling Great Mang dynasty to the south, and blocked the cave barbarians to the east, preventing them from making much progress. Meanwhile, this woman was precisely the little sister of Yunqin Empire's current emperor, the one with the greatest authority in this world. This truly was a meeting bestowed by the heavens. If it wasn't for her leaving the imperial city, forget about a city supervisor like Li Qilong, even if it was a provincial supervisor, they might not necessarily be able to see this woman many times in their lives. That was why even if this woman wasn't all that stunning in appearance, her thin lips even giving one a bit of ice-cold and fickle impression, it was precisely because of this woman's status, her harsh words directed at Li Qilong just now that made this Li Qilong, who already didn't have much passion left for female charms since several years ago, even when he was only staring at her thin lips, feel a wave of indescribable treacherous flame surge in his lower abdomen. Nervousness, fear, and hatred filled his eyes as he stared at this white-clothed woman. His mind was only filled with thoughts of tearing her clothes to shreds, pressing her down and ravaging her while stabbing and cutting her snow-white body. The black cloth masked swordsmen were all extremely dauntless, moreover, their bodies presumably all had ambiguous passion blazing within. Even though this white-clothed woman was definitely a cultivator, these black cloth masked swordsmen, after a moment of sluggishness, already reached the carriage's surroundings, charging in a fanatical manner. When a black masked swordsman fiercely stepped on the head of one of the collapsed horses, leaping high into the air, the black border army long blade hacking down towards this white-clothed woman, the white-clothed woman was still standing at the front of the carriage, nothing in her hands at all. However, this black masked swordsman's pupils suddenly contracted. The white-clothed woman's right hand reached out, and then with a strange type of posture and speed, before his blade descended, it already landed on his wrist. He clearly heard the arm bones below his own armor shatter, and then the black long blade already shifted into the white-clothed woman's hands. This black long blade, while moving along the fine armor crack of his neck, removed his head. At the same time, the white-clothed woman's left hand also already lightly tapped on his breastplate. Boom! This was just a light tap, yet the noise that was released was like that of a muffled, heavy explosion. This black masked swordsman's head moved upwards, but his body was instead like a kite with its string cut, flying backwards, a clear, fine fist imprint by his chest. The blood that gushed out from the severed neck rained down on several black masked swordsmen's bodies, covering their view, yet not a single drop landed on this white-clothed woman's body. The surroundings suddenly went cold, everyone's line of sight following that headless corpse and rain of blood's movements. However, in that instant, the white-clothed woman already got off the carriage, two heads shooting into the sky with a swing of her blade. One of the headless corpses was also pushed out by a palm, making two black masked swordsmen fly outwards too. Black masked swordsmen swarmed over from all sides, but this white-clothed woman only walked slowly, as if she was incredibly relaxed. With each swing of her blade, if heads didn't fly, then it was bone fragments that flew outwards. No one was able to stop her at all. 3 swordsmen swung their blades at the same time, yet with just a turn of her hand, the 3 blades were all sent smashing back into their own bodies, the 3 of them tumbling backwards in an incredibly miserable state. She was just like a giant elephant moving through a flock of sheep, even if it was the most simple movement, even if her next move was predicted, it was still completely impossible to stop. Underneath the oil paper umbrella, Li Qilong's body was already shaking uncontrollably. He knew that this white-clothed woman was a cultivator, but he never expected her to be this strong. In the forest, several dozen archers in bamboo hats stood coldly like boulders, the black stone power bows in their hands never leaving the white-clothed woman's position. 2 individuals slowly approached from the bamboo forest behind these dozens of archers. One of them was a giant with a robust build, on his body a set of bronze heavy armor, even his face covered underneath, a horrifying dual-bladed giant axe in his hand. He was a head taller than even the tallest archer, while the dual-bladed poleaxe in his hands was almost the same length as his height. Regardless of whether it was the heavy armor covering his body or the poleaxe's snow-white blades, they all had fine and orderly runes carved onto them, carrying a type of unique power, no raindrop stopping on them. The other individual wore an ordinary set of gray-colored cotton robes, his face not covered. This was a middle-aged man who had an ordinary build, a grim expression on his face. He didn't have any weapons in hand. His hair that was turning white at his temples was pinned together by 3 jet-black pins into 3 buns, definitely a bizarre hairstyle that left a deep impression. While watching this scene of carnage, the heavily armored giant asked the grim-faced middle-aged man next to him, "Can we win? Should be cultivation at the state master level, we should be barely enough." The grim-faced middle-aged man's brows were furrowed tightly as he said this quietly. "Then we should go." The heavy armored giant was immediately eager to give it a try, the heavy armor and the giant axe in hand releasing a faint yellow radiance. The middle-aged man's robes were completely drenched, yet he didn't seem concerned at all. He shook his head, saying, "There's no rush, let's wait a bit longer." 1. The chi and long in his name can originally be directly translated as riding and gems respectively. Long is also the pronunciation for dragon. Chapter Volume 3 2. Standing stupidly in mud, unable to speak. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The result of waiting a bit, was more blood, more deaths. The woman's white clothes were gradually dyed red, and then diluted by the pouring rain. Her surroundings became even more muddy, becoming a scarlet-red expanse. Meanwhile, the number of those still standing, was becoming fewer and fewer. Perhaps because using this type of method to exhaust the other party's soul force didn't seem that honorable, the grim-faced middle-aged man's head was tilted slightly downwards, a bit distracted as he stared at his own dripping cotton robes. In the end, there was no longer a single other person standing around the white-clothed woman. When the 30 or so masked swordsmen realized that they were the only ones left, their crazy bloodiness was finally suppressed by uncontrollable fear. However, before they turned around to run, the rain of arrows fired from the forest already turned them into porcupines. Of the dozens of archers who were like stone sculptures, which one of them wasn't an expert who could hit virtually any target within 100 steps? When faced with the arrow barrage, the white-clothed woman whose clothes were now stained dark red merely withdrew into the carriage. There were several black arrows she wasn't able to cut down in time that landed on her body, but after a bit of yellow light that was hard to detect with the naked eye appeared, they couldn't penetrate through her skin at all, dropping into the blood-soaked mud just like that. This white-clothed woman's intentions were also extremely simple, she wasn't impatient at all. As long as she was still alive, regardless of whether she took action or not, there was no way the people here could properly continue living. Since this carriage's protection was something these arrows couldn't penetrate, then she would just wait inside. If they wanted to kill her, then they had to get close themselves. Inside the forest, the grim-faced middle-aged man laughed inside bitterly. This well-known figure was as difficult to deal with as the rumors stated after all. After lightly sweeping away a few bamboo leaves that landed on his head, he turned to the heavy armored giant who was already eager to fight, nodding and saying, "Let's go." All of the archers uniformly threw aside the bows in their hands, drawing dark longswords from their waists. Roar! The Iron Man Mark I-like heavy armored giant released a roar of joy, his body immediately becoming like a motor that was operating at full speed. The patterns on this bronze armor that originally looked like it was just thick and simple began to shine yellow, immediately making it look splendid and magnificent. With a giant snow-white battle axe that was as long as his height, his incomparably heavy body crushed into the earth, shaking up the surroundings to the point where the air released a buzzing noise. Everything that was in his path was smashed to pieces, regardless of whether it was the pouring rain or the sturdy green bamboo. The middle-aged man slowly followed behind the bamboo hat-wearing, black-clothed swordsman, while Li Qilong, who was standing on the muddy road, also walked out from under his assistant's oil paper umbrella, closing in on the carriage step by step. In his hands appeared a pair of magistrate pens. Similarly, threads of pretty yellow patterns appeared on these black pens. The heavy armored giant rushed out from the bamboo forest, running faster and faster. In the end, it was as if he was bouncing off the ground, every step taking him 2 to 3 zhang of distance. The carriage covered in arrows opened with a creak noise again. The woman whose white clothes had now been dyed a dark red walked out from the carriage again. While looking at the heavy armored giant who was at least 4 times her size, her brows furrowed slightly. The tips of her feet tapped gently against the front of the carriage. The entire carriage body trembled, while her body drifted upwards, as if she didn't have any weight, floating over to the heavy armored giant. The heavy armored giant released an overjoyed fierce shout. The giant axe that was even larger than the woman's body swept out left to right, cutting across like a white rainbow. The air was hacked apart, releasing splitting noises, countless sparkling raindrops directly smashed into blasts of watery mist, the power unimaginably vicious. The white-clothed woman was still completely empty-handed. However, the moment it looked like she was going to be smashed to pieces by this giant axe, her right hand once again moved towards the giant axe. A wave of majestic aura sprayed out from her palm and fingers that were fine white like jade. The countless raindrops in her surroundings, the moment they exploded, they then miraculously gathered towards her hand, actually forming a tail, a beautiful glowing yellow mermaid. Pa! The raindrops and the great power that erupted from within her body were instantly hacked to pieces by the giant axe. However, the heavy armored giant's mountainous body and the giant axe in his hands strangely froze midair. Immediately afterwards, the white-clothed woman landed gently on the ground, while the heavy armored giant also fell incredibly heavily. He then sat down backwards, releasing a muffled groan. State Master level cultivation after all, the merged soul actually the Heaven's Lens mermaid, upon seeing this arrogant heavy armored giant immediately suffer so greatly, the grim-faced middle-aged man who had just stepped onto the muddy path instead muttered this to himself, as if he was relieved from a burden, seemingly confirming his previous judgment. Rudong City Supervisor Li Qilong, who was originally less than 20 steps from the white-clothed lady, felt his face become deathly white. One of the magistrate pens in his hands was pointed at the white-clothed woman, shaking as he screamed like a lunatic, You actually had the cultivation of a soul master. It sounded like his shock was directed at the woman's cultivation, but right now, the horror Li Qilong felt inside was something only he himself was clear on. The white-clothed woman's cultivation, even though it was astonishing, it didn't exceed their predictions by that much. What truly left him shaken, was that the 3 individuals who remained paid absolutely no attention to him. Even though he already left the local army for many years, his body put on weight, out of shape, he still never skipped out on a day of meditation cultivation. His cultivation already reached Soul Master level, half a step from becoming a state knight. Even though his cultivation level was still far from this white-clothed woman's, it wasn't as if he didn't have any strength. However, the heavy armored giant sitting between mud and corpses, that middle-aged man in grey robes, even the assistant, who previously held up an oil paper umbrella for him, not a single one paid him any attention. This was especially the case when he froze in place. That green-clothed assistant walked past his left with the umbrella in hand, but didn't even give him a single look. He was supposed to be the one in charge of the assassination attempt this time. Only through his approval and allocation could these 3 experts, as well as all these assassins, appear here under the Empire's eyelids, yet these 3's attitudes, this matter, was already completely unrelated to him. No one paid the momentarily stunned Li Qilong who stood on the muddy path any attention. The triple-bund grey-robed middle-aged man still followed behind the several dozen black-masked swordsmen, slowly advancing. The green-clothed assistant under the oil paper umbrella also passed by Li Qilong's body, walking in an extremely patient manner. The only thing in the eyes of the heavy armored giant who had fallen into the mud was the white-clothed woman. When he fell heavily onto the ground, as endless mud and blood splattered everywhere, his bronze-heavy armor that was who knew how thick and heavy erupted with even brighter yellow radiance. Patterns bloomed like golden flowers one after another, this massive steel body crushing the ground until it trembled, bouncing up. However, before the snow-white giant axe in his hands could be brandished again, the completely calm and indifferent-faced white-clothed woman already had one palm pressed against his left abdomen. An abnormally boundless and majestic force smashed heavily into the heavy armor. On the surface of the white-clothed woman's palm and the cold metal surface, the watery mist instantly formed a spherical shock wave. The heavy armored giant released an angry roar of unwillingness once again, his massive body falling heavily onto the ground like a collapsing mountain. The white-clothed woman's foot stepped down heavily on the heavy armored giant's chest, looked down on this giant who momentarily couldn't struggle to his feet and saying indifferently, to be able to easily move within Bronze King heavy armor, apart from having state knight cultivation, you are definitely naturally blessed with divine strength as well. If you are willing to stop right now and follow me, I guarantee that you will be able to leave behind great glory in the annals of history. Ever since this white-clothed woman left Central Continent Imperial City's walls, no one has ever doubted the words she has spoken. Since she gave this type of promise, as long as this heavy armored giant nodded, then what awaited him would inevitably be glorious prospects. However, upon hearing this white-clothed woman's words, what came from the metal slits in this heavy armored giant's helmets, apart from a bit of bloodiness, was an even greater roar. Even though this white-clothed woman's strength far exceeded his imagination, he was a true soldier. Apart from his desire for battle, there was also a powerful conviction that definitely couldn't be swayed. Under the roaring sounds, his entire body turned around, wishing to crush the white-clothed woman underneath him, the giant axe also brandished once more. A trace of pity flashed past the white-clothed woman's eyes. Immediately afterwards, the only thing left in her eyes was icy-cold and ruthless killing intent. After tapping lightly on this giant's breastplate, her body floated over him. Her figure resembled a dazzling mermaid, her feet giving off a mountainous and majestic aura as she smashed heavily into the rear first joint of this heavily armored giant's helmet. Crack! That area where the armor was connected displaced slightly, a wave of power directly passing through. Pooh! A wave of blood immediately sprayed out from between the slits in the metal helmet. While the heavy armored giant's body was staggering, the white-clothed woman's body twisted through the air, a palm striking the where the armor was slightly displaced once again. Even more blood sprayed out from the slits where the giant's mouth and nose were. The heavy armored giant's axe fell from his hands, body swaying like he was drunk, yet the gray-robed middle-aged man and the assistant holding the oil paper umbrella still didn't have any intentions of taking action, still walking extremely slowly. The white-clothed woman naturally knew that they were doing this to exhaust as much of her soul force as possible. However, unknown as to whether this was because of her absolute confidence in her own strength, or because of her icy arrogant aloofness, she didn't pay the other two any attention, instead single-heartedly devoting herself to sending her palm down on the back of the heavy armored giant's head. A black-clothed swordsman wearing a conical bamboo hat already arrived behind her. His body curled up, the black longsword stabbing from down to up in an extremely treacherous manner, directly piercing towards the space between her legs. Regardless of whether it was an ordinary soldier or a low-level cultivator, or perhaps even for swordsmen who weren't necessarily cultivators, against a cultivator like the white-clothed woman, this sword aimed between the legs was precisely the only weak point that could be attacked. When faced with this black-clothed swordsman who, despite not being a cultivator, was still clearly a powerful soldier, the white-clothed woman still continued to indifferently smack the back of the heavy armored giant's head. As if planned through precise calculations, after this strike, the bones of the heavy armored giant released fracturing noises. His body could not remain standing anymore, falling backwards powerlessly. Meanwhile, the white-clothed woman effortlessly removed the giant axe from his hands, holding it in a single hand, smashing downwards. The black-clothed swordsman's body seemed like it had been hit by a carriage, the black longsword in his hands instantly broken into 3 parts, his entire body flying outwards. After smashing into several swordsmen, his body landed on the ground miserably, like a wet noodle. Chapter Volume 3:3. Because I am a genius, you are listening at novelfull.audio. These black-clothed swordsmen who abandoned their bows for swords' bodies were beaten rotten, bones snapped, becoming muddled clumps of flesh as they landed on the ground. Even if their hearts were steady like boulders, these black-clad swordsmen's eyes still completely became red, releasing vicious, almost inhuman howls. However, the white-clad woman was still standing there, perfectly unharmed, only raindrops and the blood of enemies landing on her body. The distressed-faced middle-aged man and the green-clad assistant with an oil paper umbrella in hand walked together. However, just like before, they still only spectated, watched as the last black-clad swordsman's scream tore through the air, body flying through the sky, and then landed on the ground, no longer displaying a trace of life. On the muddy path, there was only the white-clothed woman, the grim-faced middle-aged man, the oil paper umbrella holding green-clad assistant, as well as Li Qilong who held magistrate pens left, only these 4 standing. This world entered a momentary peacefulness. There was only the light pattering of rain, no one trying to seize the initiative to attack. The dazzling giant axe in the white-clothed woman's hands was still dripping blood. Her eyes first landed on the grim-faced middle-aged man's unique hairstyle, calmly and indifferently asking, "You are someone from the south?" This junior is Qiu Luosha, studied under Long Jia, precisely from the south as the princess says. The grim-faced middle-aged man nodded his head slightly in courtesy. Even though his age was greater than the white-clothed woman's, he still understood extremely clearly that regardless of whether it was status or cultivation, the other party could be described with the word senior. That was why his expression was extremely natural, having no qualms about what he just said. "Seems like you are a student of Thousand Devil Nest." The white-clothed woman nodded faintly. "Devil Nest to Rudong City is at least a 2-month journey, you've worked hard to get here." The grim-faced middle-aged man and the green-clad assistant, who had remained beneath the oil paper umbrella the entire time, were both a bit stunned. They had already replayed this meeting with this white-clothed lady who had Yunqin Empire's most noble blood flowing through her veins countless times, yet they never expected the other party to actually utter these words when they truly faced each other. It wasn't that difficult. After several breaths of silence, the slightly rigid-faced middle-aged man shook his head. "This junior has always remained in Thousand Brilliance Mountain, which is why rushing here didn't take that long. My Yunqin Empire has always attached heavy importance to military might, even more importance to courage. After you die, I will have someone return your corpse to Thousand Brilliance Mountain, allow you to return to your homeland." The white-clothed woman looked at this grim-faced middle-aged man, saying this with a dull tone. If her words were spoken by any bystander, almost anyone would feel that it was too egotistical and arrogant, yet when she spoke these words, the grim-faced middle-aged man's body instead leaned forward slightly, solemnly displaying an act of respect. "Many thanks for senior's considerations." The white-clothed woman nodded slightly, and then turned towards the green-clad assistant beneath the oil paper umbrella. "And you?" The green-clad assistant remained silent, not saying anything. The corners of the white-clothed woman's lips turned slightly cold, no longer saying anything unnecessary. "Which one of you will come first?" The grim-faced middle-aged man revealed a bitter smile. "Then this junior will go first." The rain continued to fall. An intense and clear cry abruptly sounded in this world, the grim-faced middle-aged man's right sleeve completely split open at the shoulder. A purple thin blade, due to the extreme speed, drew out a trail of afterimages through the air, hacking towards the white-clothed woman. The white-clad woman took a light step. The snow-white giant axe swept out horizontally, smashing into the purple thin blade in the middle-aged man's hand, releasing an ear-splitting crisp noise. The grim-faced middle-aged man's entire body shook slightly, sent flying by the great power, landing in the mud several zhang away. His expression was now much more pale. However, the purple longsword that was thin to the point of almost being transparent wasn't damaged in the slightest, only wisps of purple light swimming along the blade itself. Purple Jade, you are Thousand Devil Nest's disciple after all. As if she knew what everyone before her was thinking, the white-clothed woman didn't continue her attacks, instead nodding in praise. The grim-faced middle-aged man released a bitter chuckle again. A clear cry sounded again from the curtain of rain, man and blade tearing through the droplets, arriving before the white-clothed woman. However, the white-clothed woman's movements were still extremely simple, the axe that was even faster than this middle-aged man forcing him to retract his blade, block in front of him. Then, he flew out miserably once again. Dang, dang, dang. Purple sword shadows continuously danced around the white-clad woman's body, the grim-faced middle-aged man like a big bird that continuously flew around the white-clad woman. However, the results of crossed blades each time instead made his expression more and more pale, his right arm that held the blade shaking even more, drops of blood starting to seep out of his mouth, then, drops of blood began to flow out from his nostrils. The white-clothed woman's expression didn't reveal the slightest bit of impatience, only brandishing the axe, forcing this middle-aged man to fall back again and again. Suddenly, she took another step forward. There was no exceptionally powerful aura that left her body, but with this step, the middle-aged man could no longer hold on anymore. The yellow light on his body went out like a candle flame. When the purple longsword made contact with the giant axe, it separated from his hand, the blade smashing heavily into his own body instead. As if what struck his body wasn't this thin blade, but rather a great hammer, the grim-faced middle-aged man's chest immediately caved in. His hands fell powerlessly at his sides, body flying outwards, and then it planted heavily into the mud. Blood flowed out from his mouth and nose like a fine stream, making it impossible for him to breathe. However, his expression was still extremely calm. Senior Ouyang, seems like it's up to you now. Unknown as to whether this was done sheerly through willpower, after this already fatal injury, this individual who clearly knew more about what was at stake than Li Qilong didn't immediately die, instead powerlessly looking towards the dark curtain of rain, uttering this with a mouthful of blood and rainwater. The green-clad assistant with the oil paper umbrella in hand silently bowed deeply towards this expert whose entire body was buried in mud. The moment he bowed deeply, the rainwater in his surroundings was suddenly bound by the surrounding air's fine vibrations, everything seemingly slowing down. Crack! The oil paper umbrella, under this strange and powerful vibration, was completely crushed into fragments, scattering in the rain, revealing a pale and young face. This assistant who previously remained hidden under the pergola, and then under the oil paper umbrella, all of his hair, including his eyebrows, were snow-white colored. Dong! 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 This white-haired man who gave off a solemn and resolute feeling, his heart suddenly released a war drum-like noise. Following the release of these noises, the vessels under his skin all bulged one after another, becoming thick and sinister. Moreover, they began to turn a terrifying black color, as if black threads were appearing on his body. Purgatory Mountain. Li Qilong was standing on the muddy road in somewhat of a daze, as he watched these strange changes take place on the body of this green-clad assistant. His body also began to uncontrollably shake, unknown whether it was because of the cold, or because of fear. Suddenly, he completely lost control of himself. The pair of magistrate pens fell into the mud, and then like a woman who was being violated, he howled, "Impossible! How could you be someone from Purgatory Mountain?" It was precisely like the warning the middle-aged uncle left behind for Lin Shi. There were too many unclear things in this world, too many powerful individuals. Yunqin Empire had Green Luan Academy, while the South's great Mang dynasty also had the existence of Purgatory Mountain. What was terrifying weren't the strong, what was frightening was the appearance of powerful individuals from places like Purgatory Mountain by one's own side. Since there was a state knight level cultivator from Purgatory Mountain here, then what purpose did he serve? Could it be that I, a veteran of 100 battles, someone who climbed to the city supervisor rank with great difficulty, hadn't even touched upon the so-called art of politics yet? I was merely a chess piece pushed around at will by those people. He, who had reached the city supervisor position, originally thought that he had entered the true levels of politics. However, only now did he vaguely acknowledge how superficial, uncouth, and laughable he was. The entire body of the grim-faced middle-aged man who was buried in mud suddenly twitched intensely, his caved chest also releasing a strange noise. The green-clad assistant whose body was covered in black blood patterns knew that this grim-faced middle-aged man was at his limit. Moreover, he also understood extremely clearly that the only reason this middle-aged man held on like this, was to see the final result with his own eyes, but this type of struggle would inevitably be an incomparably painful one. That was why he had to end this quickly. He gathered all of his body's strength, then took a deep breath, shifting all of the soul force in his dantian into his own blood vessels. All of the rainy mist around his body suddenly turned into white energy. However, the moment he prepared to take a step towards the white-clad woman, his expression suddenly went rigid. He suddenly felt like the surrounding air suddenly developed a bit of irregular vibration. Moreover, this irregular shaking actually came from beneath his feet, coming from the underground mud. All of a sudden, this expert from Great Mang Dynasty's sacred land thought of a certain possibility. He suddenly raised his feet, trying to crush this entire muddy path with a stamp of his feet. However, it was already too late. An extremely weak sword radiance shot out from the mixture of blood and mud, avoiding his feet, and then suddenly accelerated. It released an astonishing screaming noise in the skies. Following a light pu noise, this streak of sword radiance severed all of the protruding black veins by the right side of his neck, and then rushed into the skies, spinning around the top of his head. The green-clothed assistant held his neck, but the black blood still shot out from between his fingers like arrows. His eyes widened. Only now did he see clearly, seeing that the green-clothed young lady seated at the front of the carriage had unknowingly when already left the carriage impaled by black arrows, seriously looking at the flying sword spinning above his head. This flying sword was a shaftless blade, slightly silver in color, flickering with cold radiance. Apart from some fine symbols, there were also clear ice-shaped patterns. How could this be? The green-clothed assistant slowly knelt down into the pit he produced through his stomp, the rainwater that filled up the pit reaching his waist. He looked at that green-clothed young lady whose hair was in pigtails, her face that was childish, yet completely disregarded the blood and corpses on the ground, his eyes full of bewilderment and confusion. How is that possible? You are only this old, how can you control a flying sword over 50 steps? How could you have possibly reached sacred expert level cultivation? Perhaps because he knew it was futile, he gave up on covering his neck, the black blood thus gushing out even more crazily from his neck. While watching the unending stream of black blood, the green-clothed young lady frowned slightly, but still seriously replied, I was born with this young-looking face, also, I am a genius, Noel.N. Chapter Volume 3-4. I still don't like how you are listening at novel full.audio. Genius. The green-clothed assistant suddenly became silent. He was first completely in a daze, and then with a bitter smile full of disappointment and frustration, his body collapsed into a pit filled with muddy water, immediately submerged within, no trace of him left to be found. He began cultivating at the age of 7, ignited his soul force seed at the age of 11, broke through into soul knight cultivation at the age of 12. At the age of 15, he entered Great Mang Dynasty's most prestigious Purgatory Mountain to cultivate, reaching soul master level cultivation at the age of 16. Then, with only 6 years of time, not only did he break into state knight level, he even became one of Purgatory Mountain's dark heroes. In all of Purgatory Mountain, throughout the entire Great Mang Dynasty, he was already a well-known figure among cultivators, a genius in everyone's eyes. He also believed that in this world, there weren't many people who could compare to him in cultivation speed, nor did he feel any qualms about his title as a genius. That was why, even though right from the start, he knew that this young female driver might also be a cultivator, when he saw her delicate frame that clearly still had room for growth, even if she began cultivating from the moment she became self-aware, a dozen or so years of time, what kind of cultivation level could she even reach? However, reality was before his very eyes. This young lady was at the sacred expert level of cultivation, a level he might not necessarily reach even if cultivated another 20 years. The green-clothed young lady's response was just that simple, yet it was even more so real. Even if she naturally looked young, her real age a year or two older, sacred expert level, she was what a true genius was. Sacred expert, born naturally young-looking, when he felt a wave of indescribably powerful sword intent, heard the sound of his own senior brother falling into that water pit, the grim-faced middle-aged man who was currently laying in mud felt that this was a rather unique response. He couldn't help but want to laugh, yet couldn't. After a wave of intense twitching, he asked one last question, moreover a question about swords. What kind of sword is this? Why is the aura so icy cold? The green-clothed young lady looked at him, silently nodding and seriously replying, heart-sealing frost. The grim-faced middle-aged man didn't release another sound, his body slowly becoming ice-cold under the endless rain, unknown if he even heard the green-clothed young lady's response in the end. Li Qilong's entire body was shaking as he stood there. From the moment black veins appeared on the green-clad assistant's body, he already became aware just how superficial and ignorant he had been all this time, a city supervisor, provincial supervisor, 8 sectors, these titles were so clear in the past, yet only now did he realize just how far away he was from those hidden courts, inner institutions, the ones who were behind layers and layers of curtains. Turns out that after climbing for so many years, advancing boldly in Rudong City, in the end, it was nothing more than this. Your Majesty, please spare my life. While watching the shaftless flying sword move back to the green-clothed young lady's side and into her sleeves, Li Qilong released a helpless laugh, and then looked towards the white-clothed woman, pleading for forgiveness. He didn't kneel, because he knew that even if he did, it would still be useless. The white-clothed woman gave the heavy-armored giant not far off to the side a look, looked at the green-clad assistant submerged in the muddy pit, and then at the grim-faced middle-aged man. With an ice-cold voice, she said, "If they were willing to surrender, I can let them live. You, however, are the only one that cannot be forgiven." Why? Li Qilong's body trembled intensely, and then he said firmly, "Your Majesty, I can make up for my mistakes through merit, I can inform your Majesty of who it was that incited me, all of this as long as your Majesty can promise to let me and my family go." Why? The white-clothed woman was originally calm, but when she heard this line, she instead suddenly became furious, saying with a stern voice, "You still have the nerve to ask me why? Fine, let me tell you why. It is because these 3 aren't cultivators of our Yunqin Empire, so there is no ground for blame, but you are one of Yunqin Empire's glorious city supervisors. Also, these swordsmen, they are all powerful soldiers of our Yunqin Empire, yet because of your stupidity and foolishness, your conspiracies, they had to die here, moreover under my hands. You are the reason why all of these imperial soldiers, who originally could have seized glory and honor, now have to be shamed after death, yet you still want me to leave you with your life." While staring at Li Qilong, whose face was now becoming more and more snow-white, his body shaking more and more, the white-clothed woman's tone was filled with indescribable disgust. "Moreover, you are too stupid to the point of leaving me disgusted. You thought that you really would have better prospects down south. Why don't you use your head a bit? Even though I'm a cultivator, I definitely won't enter the battlefield. By killing me, what benefits would Great Mang Dynasty even receive? Are they scared of the changes I will bring to Yunqin Empire? Even if their thoughts were this long-term, they would definitely have to first consider the endless wrath my death would incur first. My Yunqin Empire was established through martial might. Following the assassination of the emperor's sister, if no troops were sent out, not even my brother the emperor would be able to quell the wrath of our citizens. They were merely throwing some rocks, playing along, seeing if they could make the waters a bit more turbid. If they could make some capable individuals in our Yunqin Empire fall not on the battlefield, but rather under their own conspiracies, then that's naturally a good thing. Meanwhile you, as a soldier of Yunqin Empire, a city supervisor, actually didn't even have a trace of vigilance, even believing everything they told you. You tell me if there is any use in keeping you alive in this world. As for someone like you, someone as utterly stupid as you, the people you could contact, just what kind of people could they be? Now that this type of thing happened, it will be investigated, even those above the ones you came into contact with will be investigated. Whether you speak or not, what use is there? The white-clothed woman's tone calmed down a bit, but she wasn't willing to say anything else on this matter. She only looked at Li Qilong, whose entire body was shaking, saying, seeing as how you previously made great contributions to our Yunqin Empire in the border army, if you are still a soldier of the empire, then pick up your sword, I will at least leave your corpse intact. The last bit of hope he had of survival, even this last straw he was clinging onto, was erased by ice-cold ridicule. When he realized that there was no chance of a turn for the better anymore, while he slowly lowered his body to pick up his magistrate pens, he saw that his official uniform was already completely covered in mud. After all of that, in the end, I am still nothing more than a peasant. Li Qilong straightened his body, revealing a bitter smile. Then, as if venting his emotions, he began to charge crazily at the white-clothed woman. The white-clothed woman walked up to the green-clothed young lady. While Li Qilong thrusted out the magistrate pens in his hands with all of his strength, his eyes closed, an icy cold aura penetrated his body, piercing through his heart, and then came out of his back. However, right at this time, what made him suddenly widen his eyes in disbelief, was that the magistrate pen that was originally destined to never be able to inflict any damage towards this white-clothed young lady, instead penetrated flesh, roiling hot blood falling on his face. He saw that in the hands of that white-clothed woman was the grim-faced middle-aged man's purple jade thin blade, currently pierced through his chest, his strength and will quickly scattering. However, the magistrate pens in his hands also pierced into the white-clothed young lady's stomach, producing a dazzling bloom of blood, currently bursting from her white palace clothes. You! Li Qilong's eyes were completely widened, his body stumbling backwards, a scream released from his mouth. However, the shock he felt would instead never obtain an explanation. The white-clothed woman let go of the blade, and as a result, together with the purple jade thin sword, he fell on his back, never to regain consciousness again. Even though there was a pen stabbed into her abdomen, blood continuously trickling down her clothes, the white-clothed woman's expression instead remained extremely calm, only turning around towards the carriage covered in black arrows. The green-clothed young lady didn't walk up to provide any aid either. Instead, she just stood there, frowning as she looked into her eyes, asking with a sunken voice, "Why?" I believe you also understand that this was a warning for me from those who don't wish for me to continue down the path I chose to take. Meanwhile, what I represent is the will of my brother the emperor, which means that they naturally already made the preparations to accept his wrath. The white-clothed woman continued to walk towards the carriage. I clearly cannot continue doing things as they expect. The green-clothed young lady quietly thought to herself, her brows furrowing deeper and deeper. I know that by doing this, you can make the flames burn greater, giving you more reason to do some things, while the others won't even have any reasons to rise up in opposition. But have you considered that by making the flames greater, it will burn other places as well, for example, Greenlawn Academy? The white-clothed woman stopped. Her body trembled slightly, and then with a low voice, she said, "Nangong Weiyang, you are indeed a genius, not only a genius in terms of cultivation, you can even think about these things so clearly. However, do you think that I have the room for choice here? You've already followed me through a larger half of Yunqin Empire. As for what degree of corruption our style of governing has fallen to, you've also seen it with your very own eyes. Moreover, even while under my brother the Emperor's brilliant governing, Yunqin Empire still has many people my brother cannot touch, cannot move. I originally believed that even if the justice sector, even if the martial sector, even if some people were dissatisfied with the path I took, they would at least show some restraint, do some self-reflection, control their dissatisfaction, but instead, what have they done? In our very Yunqin territory, they're actually brazen to the point of using this type of method to warn me, warn my brother the Emperor. Then, from here on out, what else wouldn't they dare do? After a slight pause, a hint of anger that was hard to disguise appeared in the white-clothed woman's eyes. Nangong Weiyang, do not forget, Green Luan Academy is also one of the places even my brother the Emperor cannot move. Moreover, you have never taken one step inside Green Luan Academy, your cultivation completely the result of Imperial City's full support. I really find it hard to understand why you have such a powerful favorable impression of Green Luan Academy. Because I like it. The green-clothed young lady looked at the white-clothed woman, replying seriously and without any hesitation. I like Principal Zhang, I like the way the academy does things. In the mind of this girl named Nangong Weiyang, the word concealment didn't seem to be in her dictionary, which was why even when talking to the still bleeding princess of Yunqin Empire, after saying these things, she still didn't care what the other party was thinking at all, seriously adding, you being like this. I don't like it at all. The white-clothed woman remained speechless for a long time. Then, she took a step forward again, walking towards the carriage with a bit of difficulty, her voice a bit weak and downcast as she said, however, you should also understand that, everything I'm doing, isn't for myself, but for Yunqin Empire. I do. Nangong Weiyang nodded, and then seriously said, however, I still don't like it. When faced with such a stubborn young lady, the white-clothed woman knew that she had no way of refuting her, the waves of dizziness also making her not want to say anything else. As such, she only silently opened the carriage door, and then sat down. After sitting down, doing what she could to stop the bleeding, this white-clothed woman released a light sigh. She began to think to herself, from the day she walked out from Central Continent's Imperial City, she always lost track of how many people didn't like her, yet today, she actually still so stubbornly tried to convince a young lady even more stubborn than herself. It truly was a pointless struggle. Chapter Volume 3-5. A Night of Dragon Fish Dancing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A jar of sake rested at the bow of a ship. There was a red container of unrefined sugar used to preserve food, yet there was nothing preserved that could be enjoyed with alcohol. A black canopy boat moved along the center of Peach Blossom River. Inside of it was a beauty dressed in rainbow-colored clothes, a Chinese lute in her arms. Her beautiful appearance was half-veiled, eyes closed, slender jade-like fingers gently plucking on the instrument, the clear and melodious notes drifting along the clear river. Suddenly, her red lips opened slightly, quietly singing, with the evening eastern winds, the flowers of 1,000 trees dance about, falling down like stars, falling like rain, precious horses guiding a carriage along a fragrant road. With the whistling of winds, the swirl of a jade pot's brilliance, comes a night of dragon fish dancing. Amidst the fireflies and snow willows' golden strands, laughter gradually dims, the fragrance scatters. After searching endlessly, when I suddenly turned around, that person was actually there, within the waning lights. When the song ended, the rainbow beauty quietly put away the pick, but still continued to hold the lute with her eyes lowered, momentarily silent. What, you don't like the lyrics? A barefooted Zhu Moyan was sitting at the bow of the ship, dressed in white hemp garments. He looked towards the rainbow beauty, revealing a faint smile, saying this gently. The rainbow beauty shook her head slightly. Your Honor, these lyrics are superb, but the mood is a bit too somber. Zhu Moyun looked at the rainbow beauty, gently swirling his wine cup. These lyrics were left behind by Principal Zhang in the past, it is definitely not something I can come up with. Moreover, the meaning behind these lyrics is extremely beautiful. Sanxian, it is because you have some stuff on your mind, which is why you feel that it is a bit somber. Do you still remember how long we've known each other for? If this humble one's memory hasn't failed me, then it should be 3 years and 6 months. The Rainbow Beauty lowered her lute, walking over from the narrow cabin, sitting down on the other side of Zhu Moyan, helping him pour wine. Your memory is impeccable. Zhu Moyun quietly looked at her, watching her lily-white hands, saying with a light sigh, back then, when I first met you, you were but a Justice Sector small official. The Rainbow Beauty revealed a sweet-tempered smile, saying with a soft voice, however now, you are already a Justice Sector enforcer, directly above that is Vice Sector head. Within all of Imperial City, there aren't many people who could make you lower your eyes and bend at the waist. Your prospects are beautiful and brilliant. If you always stay with me, it definitely isn't a good thing. Is this what you are thinking about? Zhu Moyun laughed, emptying the alcohol in the small cup before him in one gulp. With a tone of self-mockery, he said, this is what you don't understand. Once one reaches my position, if one wants to climb any further, it no longer hinges upon how much I do, but rather if those above me are willing to let me climb further or not, willing to leave open a seat for me. That is why I've already properly thought through things. If this trip goes smoothly, no matter what, I am going to bring you back with me to Central Continent Imperial City. The Rainbow Beauty's hands trembled slightly. She didn't know what exactly this trip entailed, but she didn't ask either, only lowering her head further and quietly saying, Your Honor, let me drink with you. Zhu Moyun's expression was gentle. He raised his head slightly. There was a waning crescent in the skies above, its reflection cast on the waters below. A green carrier pigeon flew over from the distance, but it directly landed on his left shoulder. Firmly tied to its vermilion-colored claw was a small message container. After taking a deep breath, he extracted a small paper scroll from the container. After just a brief scan, his expression suddenly turned pale. The red lips of the Rainbow Beauty trembled slightly, but the expression on her face was still sweet-tempered. She really is going through too much. Zhu Moyun released a slow sigh, speaking a line the Rainbow Beauty could not comprehend. After giving her a deep look, he said softly, accompany me in one more drink. The Rainbow Beauty nodded, pouring more wine. Their wine cups touched, and then they both drained them in one gulp. However, what made her entire body go rigid was that the same pot of wine, even though she was fine when she drank from her cup, when it entered Zhu Moyun's mouth, there were wisps of black blood that flowed out. In this world, the most tragic thing, is seeing one's love right before one's eyes, yet unable to bring her into your embrace, enjoy her warmth. I'm sorry, Zhu Moyun still sat there without moving, however, tears of blood were flowing out of his eyes. His head also drooped, his voice gradually growing faint, and then finally completely disappearing. The Rainbow Beauty's face was still gentle and calm. She looked at the unmoving Zhu Moyun in a stupor, recalling the figure of this man who climbed onto the bow of her ship 3 years ago, full of ambition. However, she would never see him again. She quietly got up, produced a lute from the cabin, and then while sitting on the other side of Zhu Moyun, she slowly began to put on makeup, her appearance changing from her previous refreshing and clear prettiness to a gorgeous and incomparable beauty. Your Honor, I will accompany you. Regardless, from today on, I will always follow you. When the Rainbow Beauty completed her look, she looked towards that waning moon above the heart of the river. As if she was going to pluck it straight out of the sky, she reached towards that brilliant crescent, and then she jumped out, producing a splash of jade. Like pearls in the water. Rudong City's supervisor Li Qilong committed treason, carrying out an assassination attempt on the traveling princess Changsun Muyue. The princess lost consciousness from her severe injuries. That night, Justice Sector's third most authoritative figure, namely Zhu Moyun, ingested poison, committing suicide on Peach Blossom River. The female singer accompanying him jumped into the river, also committing suicide. Early the next day, the emperor's imperial court session in Central Province Imperial City. The emperor was currently seated on a coiling dragon throne, quietly examining the dozen or so officials kneeling before him in the golden brick hall. Everyone knew that Yunqin Empire's current emperor was 30 years of age, his energy at its very peak, yet this outwardly unswerving, yet seemingly magnanimous and gentle lean man released a faint feeling of exhaustion. This made all of the officials who were kneeling on the ground feel their hearts go cold, assuming that the emperor most likely couldn't sleep last night over dealing with this matter. Zhu Moyun died, but this isn't enough of an explanation for me. Even though there was thunder ringing furiously within his mind, the voice of this man dressed in dragon robes was still just as calm, gentle yet firm. His eyes lowered towards the tea before him, his gaze not even stopping over these chancellors' bodies. Was it really just the justice sector? The Bronze King heavy armor is something unique to the border armor. Even though this armor isn't something especially formidable in itself, the number of those who could wear it is few. I believe you all do not need me to remind you that some matters could have been investigated through this Bronze King heavy armor, right? What my sister represents is my decree in order, to even dare assassinate her, then in this imperial city, shouldn't I also be scared and on edge each day? After calmly saying these things, the corners of this person who had the most authority in this world finally began to uncontrollably tremble. His voice also finally became a bit higher in pitch than how it was normally. Do not forget, my father only left a single pair of daughter and son, and I only have one younger sister. The many chancellors who knelt in the main hall, as well as the few individuals seated behind 9 layers of heavy curtains at both sides of this hall, all laughed inwardly, thinking that it was this Yunqin Empire's brother and sister pair who overturned Yunqin Empire, crossing the line a bit to begin with. She was basically doing all of the work of the justice sector. Then what was the justice sector supposed to do? The chancellors here today, which one of them didn't know that everyone's relationships were like a pile of firewood? If just a single piece was removed, then who knew how many other pieces would slide down? Moreover, what kind of individual was she? If there was a well-known figure seated behind the curtains in this palace, would she really not sense anything? Even an assassination attempt like this wanted to hurt her. However, what the current emperor said, his wrath, was real. After all, that woman's serious injuries really did exacerbate his fury. What if she really did die? That was why, regardless of how they felt, in this type of situation, they could only hide it inside, concede a bit, one step forward, one step back. The miscalculation this time was only that they never expected that girl who lived like a spoiled princess to actually have such a decisive and fierce side. All they could do now was to focus on minimizing the effects as much as possible, and then slowly regain everything bit by bit hereafter. Tansang ancient country's imperial palace, an imperial strategic advisor found it hard to hide the happiness he felt. He bowed in respect towards this young Emperor Feng Xian, worked up as he said, news of Rudong's chaos has been confirmed. It is the perfect time to seize this opportunity to send troops, strike while the iron is hot. The child emperor, whose face was even more tender than Qiu Lu's, gave this imperial strategic advisor a look of slight dissatisfaction. Why? Yunqin Empire's Senate elders originally allowed this matter to happen to deliver a warning to the imperial throne, for him not to cross the line, but with Changsun Mue's retaliation, they will undoubtedly have to back off a bit. During this step forward and step backwards, there will definitely be a bit of chaos. Yunqin's emperor is extremely domineering to begin with. If 1 or 2 people like Zhu Moyun don't die this time, how can his anger be quelled? This reasoning is so shallow. If even you could think of it, you think those seniors behind the curtains in Yunqin won't think of it. The best way of quelling anger is naturally through blood and deaths. If they wish to kill, it naturally also doesn't have to be an imperial city. Emperor Feng Xian looked at this strategist with mockery. With those people's abilities, they could completely send those people to die in the border army. Also, for Yunqin's emperor, if we make a big move, it'll be the best opportunity for him. You should understand that the best method of exchanging blood is to have armies fight. When one batch of people dies, another will be exchanged. If this happens, just how much leverage would he have at his disposal? After a slight sneer, Emperor Feng Xian looked at this imperial strategic advisor with slightly narrowed eyes, adding, moreover, you should also understand that those Senate elders seated behind the curtains, compared to the impetuous Yunqin Emperor, are much more cool-headed. Even if they are harder to deal with, I would still rather face these old fellas who have carefully deliberated over every detail than risk it all against someone who is full of ambition, someone who doesn't hesitate to face any consequences. If the South wishes to make a move, then just let them risk their lives first. However, that old bastard down south might have thought things over even more carefully than us, or else the circumstances down south wouldn't be like how they are now. Everything the emperor says is wise. This strategic advisor took a deep breath, respectfully giving this short-statured, ordinary-looking child emperor another bow of respect. Everyone in the hall who heard the conversation between these two felt cold sweat emerge on their backs. They originally thought that it was just the Empress Dowager who was wise and far-sighted, excelled at the art of politics, but right now, she was clearly not governing from behind the curtains. Meanwhile, just how old was this child emperor? Yet towards the conspiracies of politics, he understood them even more clearly and thoroughly than the imperial strategic advisor who immersed himself on these matters year in and year out. Could it be that the control and toying with countless people's lives and deaths, the art of politics most people found incomprehensible their entire lives, for people like him, was but an innate tendency? The tender-faced child emperor no longer looked at this strategist, instead sweeping his eyes over the remaining officials standing in this court. While rubbing his temples in a bit of a weary manner, he slowly said, we absolutely must try to rescue Nan Gongma. He is a rarely seen cultivation genius from Tangsang to begin with, moreover, his loyalty is second to none, do not hesitate to pay any cost. If he never leaves Green Luan Academy and cannot be rescued, then exchange for his return. Chapter Volume 3:6. Who exactly is this person? You are listening at novelfull.audio. The number of deaths during Rudong City's chaos was barely over 100, so compared to the harsh border army's casualties, it wasn't much. However, because the blood flowing through that woman's body was the same as Yunqin Emperor's, the monarch in Central Continent Imperial City was absolutely furious, alarming countless officials, unknown just how many people's minds were shaken. When Justice Sector's number 3, one of Yunqin Empire's young and influential officials fell by Peach Blossom River, Vice Principal Xia had just left the simple small residence he normally resided in, heading to the back of Ileo Peak. For the past few years, there were 9 senior figures who were able to sit behind the heavy layers of curtains even in the Emperor's hall, though they didn't get excessively involved, yet right now, the Emperor was just too young, the matters he wanted control over too many. He lacked the level of understanding and respect for Principal Zhang and these elders. He didn't realize that not even a wise and capable emperor could personally deal with everything, regardless of importance, make the entire empire operate according to his will. However, Rudong City and Green Luan Academy were far from each other, Central Continent Imperial City and Green Luan Academy also extremely far from each other. That was why even if Central Province Imperial City's Dragon Throne Emperor was upset, the disturbance Rudong City's supervisor raised bound to cause great headaches, despite having a chief as talented as Xiao Mingxian leading the other Milky Way lecturers behind Ileo Peak. They needed more time to figure out the ultimate direction of this matter, not to mention that they still had the Academy's own matters to tend to. As such, just like many other cities and towns, it was still peaceful in Green Luan Academy. A flower carefully planted doesn't bloom, yet a random willow branch stabbed into the ground, after a few years, may become a great tree. Is this what is going on? It seems like my decision yesterday really was wise. Inside the spacious direct spear strikes trials stone temple, Lin Shi was lying on the ground, gasping for breath, his entire body feeling like it had been fished out of water. However, when he looked towards the entrance of the stone temple, there was instead a hint of a proud smile hanging from the corners of his lips. The names listed on the signboard at the entrance of the training valley didn't necessarily mean the most strong, just like the golden sunflower he previously met. Even though his ranking was underneath his own, his true strength far surpassed his. If he didn't have Jiang Xiaoyi's help, there was no way he could defeat him. It was just yesterday that Lin Shi received a letter from his family, and then had his encounter with Gao Yanan. Lin Shi wanted to continue this hot streak today, but ended up encountering the Rainbow Tiger in the training valley. Even though he wasn't on the rankings list, his strength was greater than his own. After running crazily again, in the end, he still couldn't defeat the Rainbow Tiger symbol opponent. He really didn't want to give Su Xinhua any feelings of self-satisfaction, so Lin Shi still used his ability, returning to 10 halts ago. He first tried to avoid this opponent, moreover picking up a crossbow he didn't have any time to pick up 10 minutes ago, and only then did he accumulate 5 successive 5-pentagon emblem achievements. Originally, he was still a bit bitter about missing out on an instance of training in the direct spear strikes trial, but today, after listening to Nkei's suggestion, exchanging a course credit for a Ice One pill, as expected, he finally broke through into the initial stage Soul Knight stage. He discovered that somehow, the direct spear strikes trial suddenly became much easier. Because his strength made quite the substantial progress, he could already easily move 100 gene stone. The black stone power bow also became as comfortable to use as the hardwood bow. As a result, when the trial's black spears stabbed over, he didn't have to consciously use a lot of strength as before, his movements becoming a lot more relaxed. In addition, another important part was that even though the training Su Xinhua added to his mornings was harsh, that vest indeed greatly increased his sense of balance. In the past, after being struck heavily by a spear, it was practically impossible for him to evade the following one, or the third one, but now, if it didn't land on a particularly sensitive area, he could still immediately make evasive movements. That was why today, after using his ability again, he actually persisted through an astonishing 150.3 steps, shocking even himself. Now, the direct spear strikes trial's bronze door already seemed close. This greatly boosted Lin Shi's motivation and courage. After all, if he continued with this, perhaps it wouldn't be much longer before he could make Su Xinhua feel worse. The simpler the way one viewed the world, viewed life, the easier it was for one to become happy. That was why when he saw that this back door of the stone temple already wasn't far away, and then thought about how his letter should be on its way back home to Deerwood Town, Lin Shi's heart was full of radiance and joy as he wriggled his way back to the entrance like a worm. Not long after Lin Shi left the yellow perimeter walls, when Xuanyu walked in from another entrance, heading towards the direct spear strikes trial stone temple. At the center of his chest was the black bat symbol. This symbol recorded 3 successive 5 emblem withdrawals 2 days ago, while together with today's achievements, he was already a 5 successive 5 emblem withdrawals achiever. When Xuanyu walked rather slowly today, his head a bit drooped, because his mind was still preoccupied with yesterday's letter from home. Rudong City chaos, Zhu Moyun died, then the people the letter mentioned, what exactly were going to be their next moves? The 9 elders behind the layers of curtains, what kind of action would they then adopt? These things ordinary students and perhaps even influential officials in different areas had no way of having access to, instead appeared in his letter from home in such a simple manner. Because he was the sole child of the Wen family, while his father was one of Yunqin's 8 great sector heads, there would be letters from home delivered to him every day. As such, unlike the other students, he also had to understand these things, verifying whether his previous judgments were accurate through the way events develop. Each day, he had to reply to his father with his own opinions on some of these matters, but he knew extremely well that with his father's abilities, he didn't need his son's opinions at all. All of this was merely to train him into developing the abilities needed to reach a position like his father's one day. Meanwhile, his father understood the academy's abilities even better than he did, which was why he didn't hide much in these ordinary family letters at all. Even though this matter is destined to affect many people, the crux of the matter isn't in the event itself, but rather what father wishes to do. As the only son of one of the empire's most influential families, this arrogant and aloof youngster began to consider how he was to reply to his father while walking into the direct spear strikes trial stone temple. In his opinion, Rudong City's matter, even though it was a big enough matter, for one family, it wasn't worth obsessing over. The most crucial thing was that of the 9 elders behind those curtains, one of them was already extremely old, moreover contracted a terminal illness. Based on some of the information he previously received, his position should open up within a few years. Even though the current emperor was brilliant and heroic, he was still someone directly involved, and as such, he couldn't see the situation as clearly as those like Wen family who looked at the situation from an outsider's perspective. During the past few years, he had always been trying to weaken the influence of the 9 senior figures, his intent that if any of these 9 positions were to open up, then there wasn't any need for it to be filled. However, these 9 positions were originally established by the late emperor precisely to avoid an error in his judgment, as well as to avoid being plotted against, which was why these members would definitely make this argument known, moreover have someone fitting sit in that position. Based on his judgment, Wen family, Leng family, and the West's army division had the highest chances of sitting in this position. Meanwhile, as a member of Green Luan Academy, his future performance would naturally have a bit of influence on his father's chances. Fortunately, their Wen family's lineage had always been outstanding, and as such, he was destined to stand out from the masses. After taking another deep breath, giving the record stuck to the entrance wall a look, a black longsword-wielding Wen Xuanyu charged into the spacious great hall. The long black spears were hacked down by him one after another, his style completely different from Lin Shi's graceful, wind-like motions, movements large and powerful, advancing fiercely through the hall like this. His strength was much greater than Lin Shi's, his movements seemingly innately gifted, exceptionally precise as he quickly slaughtered his way through this place, all of this completely impossible for a normal person to achieve. After continuously hacking down several dozen spears, he was struck by a black spear, body starting to fall. After falling who knew how many times, the spacious stone temple became quiet once more. Wen Xuanyu, who already lacked the strength to continue, was laying on the ground, unable to move a finger. Suddenly, his pupils contracted, his entire body subconsciously wishing to support himself back up. However, when his powerless arms moved, they instead incurred a terrible tearing pain, making him release a loud and overcast groan. It was because he discovered that between himself and the bronze rear door, there were actually traces of spears stabbed into the ground, these traces even extremely fresh. This could only mean that before him, in this very stone temple, there was someone who traveled a whole 17 or 18 steps further than he did. How could this be possible? Wen Xuanyu understood extremely clearly, that for new students like them, if they wanted to pass this direct spear strikes trial, the key lied in martial skill and reaction speed. It was because unless one reached soul expert level cultivation, able to cover the surface of their bodies with soul force, regardless of whether it was a mid-level or high-level soul knight, no matter how great their strength was, being struck by these spears would still deliver soul-ripping pain, moreover affect their following movements. After being struck by several spears, their fighting strength would still decline sharply. Meanwhile, among the new students, there was definitely no one who reached soul expert level. With Wen Xuanyu's talent and confidence, there was not a chance those border barbarians could have higher martial skill and reaction speed than himself. This was why if there was anyone who could break the record here, he would definitely be the first one. Yet now, there was actually someone who made it 17 or 18 steps further than he did. This left him in complete disbelief. Ever since he was permitted to enter this training valley, he trained himself in this direct spear strikes trial every single day. Under these circumstances, there was actually someone who could do it better than him. If this was true, then who exactly was this person? 1. Composite score 31 points, Heaven's Choice, Internal Study Department. Chapter Volume 3-7. Clean here you are listening at novelfull.audio. For Lin Shi, the academy was extremely peaceful, while he himself was quite busy. Ever since he was suddenly informed by Su Xingma that he had Brave's Lair aptitude, he would continuously repeat an arduous cycle, becoming completely beaten, recovering, completely beating himself up again, and then recovering again. Early in the morning, in the Rocky Valley, precisely his Brave's Lair special training. Su Xingma had his side to Lin Shi, saying with a cold and mocking tone, "You must be feeling quite pleased with yourself." Lin Shi became momentarily distracted. "I don't understand what Teacher Su is referring to when you say pleased with myself." Su Xinhua frowned, revealing an expression of disgust. "Apart from fulfilling the 5 instances of 5 emblem achievement, what else do you have that is worth being complacent over?" Lin Shi revealed a faint smile, saying, "I do indeed feel a bit pleased with myself. I advise you to put away this complacency, not to mention that you aren't the only one who fulfilled the 5 successive 5 emblem withdrawal achievement. Do you really think this means that you are strong?" Su Xinhua turned around, his eyes filled with disdain as he looked at Lin Shi, saying coldly, "You were just lucky, not encountering any true powerful opponents. If you were truly fighting on the battlefield, the number of those in the training valley who could kill you, is definitely higher than 20. Do not fool yourself into thinking that just because you obtained a point of course credit, breaking into the initial Soul Knight cultivation, that you can look all pleased with yourself in front of me. For ordinary cultivators, having a bit more or a bit less strength is completely insignificant. You can even more so throw away any thoughts of changing my opinion of you. With your aptitude, someone of your nature, it's completely impossible for you to become a brave slayer." Before waiting for Lin Shi to say anything, Su Xinhua pointed towards where the vest armor and anklets had previously been placed. "Since you already broke into a pitiful initial Soul Knight cultivation level, then from today onwards, you'll add that as well." Immediately afterwards, he didn't want to give Lin Shi even one more look, turning around and leaving. "Teacher Su, then what if I keep continuously obtaining 5 emblem achievement rewards? What then?" Lin Shi didn't get angry, curling his lips, asking with a smile while looking at Su Xinhua's back figure. Su Xinhua released a cold snort, thinking to himself. "With your pitiful strength, you even want to continuously obtain 5 emblem achievements. Moreover, even if you could do it, so what? Moreover, after that woman's blood flowed in Rudong City, who knows just what kind of changes would even happen." His heart was full of contempt, but because of his hidden predictions on this matter, as well as the loathing he felt towards Lin Shi, he wasn't willing to utter even a single word to Lin Shi, directly leaving without even stopping for a split second. Lin Shi saw the new item Su Xinhua threw on top of the rock. It was a pair of arm weights, only, these weights were made of black steel, a bit too big, and also a bit too heavy. After putting them on, even raising his hands to wipe off his own sweat was difficult, the difficulty of walking increasingly significantly. In the evening, within the mountain forest behind the 7-colored Medicine Valley bamboo building, bowstring vibrating noises continuously sounded. Tong Wei crazily fired arrows without being even the slightest bit short of breath while coldly saying to Lin Shi and Bian Linghan, who were keeping up with difficulty, "Lin Shi, your movements today are way too slow." Pfft! Lin Shi blew away a drop of sweat that landed on the corners of his lips, and then his movements became a bit faster. When he drew the bow, shooting several arrows with all his strength again, he stretched out his fingers a bit. What left him a bit inwardly shocked was that the energy stream in his dantian seemed to have divided into fine wisps, entering his arms, producing a unique type of shaking. Even though this type of unique trembling from his blood vessels didn't help the soreness of his arm and fingers, this type of feeling was still extremely wonderful, making Lin Shi feel as if his arms and fingers' flesh was becoming more and more sensitive. Could it be the result of those stances he told me to practice? Lin Shi became a bit absent-minded. He couldn't help but recall the yoga-like stances the elder in the old-fashioned robes taught him in the training valley. Can it be that because my expectations towards him are too high, which is why my disappointment is also magnified? Tong Wei looked at the clearly already utterly spent Lin Shi, also momentarily entering a state of silence. He wasn't a part of the 4-membered Heaven's Core, and as such, he didn't know about the grand arrangement of Vice Principal Xia and Xiao Mingxian. He also didn't know that apart from him, Su Xinhua, and Nkei, Lin Shi also obtained the Academy Protector Luo Huyuan's teachings. During these past few days, Lin Shi's archery precision already became a bit greater than even Bian Lingen's, Tong Wei believing this to be the result of extreme bitter training when Lin Shi returned, thus allowing him to reach his current level. As such, Lin Shi's current disappointing appearance was something he couldn't really bear to criticize, instead feeling a bit helpless. It was because no matter how accurate one's archery became, the power of his arrows would never be as powerful as those of a windstalker like Bian Linghan. This was why what he asked of Lin Shi was even more harsh than Bian Linghan, not only demanding higher precision, but also a faster firing rate. It was because Bian Linghan might kill her target with a single arrow, while Lin Shi might need several arrows to break through the enemy's defenses. Meanwhile, when faced with powerful opponents, one had to be extremely fast and precise, only by instantly firing several arrows in quick succession would there be any use. Even though Lin Shi's performance left him a bit dissatisfied, making him feel a bit of disappointment, he still saw Lin Shi's effort. This made him feel even more unresigned, not willing to just let this go, which was why he became even more strict. Again. That was why he didn't give Lin Shi too much time to breathe, shouting with a stern voice, "If your fingers cannot draw the bow, then just imitate the way I run while shooting, the stance in which I hold the bow, hurry, follow with everything you have." Su Shengma and Tong Wei's views on teaching and personal conduct were completely different, which was why while Su Shengma was harsh because of his complete dislike, even loathing of Lin Shi, Tong Wei cared about Lin Shi, having high expectations of him, and that was why he was strict. Even though he knew that the two individuals' strictness brought great benefits, moreover, Lin Shi not being bothered by Su Shengma's uncomfortable way of thinking, instead happily doing these things, enduring two types of extremely harsh training in one day, truly left him bitterly abused. That was why when he changed into his silver fox, black armor like usual, entering the training valley, while standing in a quiet area, unknown just what kind of dangers were lurking in the forest, Lin Shi couldn't help but feel a bit of a headache. Early in the morning, when he heard Su Shengma's words, he was still giddy at the thought of making this teacher's expression become ugly once more by obtaining more 5 emblem achievements. However, when he stood in the mountain forest now, he discovered that under the daily abuse of 2 special classes, there wasn't much soul force left at all. Even if he could defeat an opponent or 2, it might not be enough for him to enter the direct spear strikes trial stone temple to cultivate. I wonder where Teacher Luo is. When I am about to leave, I'll mention my wish to meet with him to the lecturer who guides me out. I wonder if this will do anything. While stepping on the thick dried leaves, Lin Shi quietly began to think about the issue with his arms trembling strangely. However, right at this time, his brows suddenly frowned, his body turning around. A black-armored student wielding a pair of swords appeared behind him like a ghost, standing less than 20 steps from him. "It's you." When he saw the symbol on the other party's chest, Lin Shi instead laughed in a relieved manner, as if a load was taken off his mind. What a coincidence. Perfect for returning a favor. Here. After nodding towards this dual sword-wielding black-armored student, he just directly ripped off a golden pentagon emblem, throwing it over. Eddie when he saw the other party stand there in a stupor, not even picking up the pentagon emblem, Lin Shi couldn't help but look strangely at this rose flower symbol student who he was already quite familiar with, asking, "What's wrong?" Actually, it isn't that much of a coincidence. Jiang Xiaoyi swallowed a gulp of saliva with difficulty, took a deep breath, and then while looking at Lin Shi, said with a bitter laugh, "I've been roaming around this training valley the entire time, looking for your traces. Today, I also searched through a larger half of the training valley, which was why finding you isn't all that strange." Lin Shi looked at Jiang Xiaoyi with a puzzled expression. "Why are you looking for me? Also, last time, why did you go so far to help me? You said you don't know either, but this doesn't seem to be a reason." That was the truth. At the time, I indeed didn't know why I helped you. However, afterwards, I carefully thought about it. Jiang Xiaoyi couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Lin Shi, but he still didn't say the reason, instead asking another question in a bit of a meaningful manner, do you know, in the Academy's recordings, during these 20 years, just how many Braveslayers have emerged in total? Lin Shi's brows jumped, immediately becoming on guard. He shook his head, saying, I do not know. What are you trying to say by bringing this up? There are a total of 15 in the Academy's public records. These 15, there isn't a single one of them who isn't a war god in our empire. Among them, the most famous one is General Situ from Jadefall Border Army. His most outstanding feat is the capture of an enemy camp, the utter defeat of an enemy army of 20,000 with just 300 men. In this battle alone, the number of formidable experts slayed by him alone totaling 20.7. The least outstanding one is Zhou Fulong, who fell in Thousand Sunset Mountain, but in that battle, he killed 3 commanding generals. Jiang Xiaoyi already sensed a wave of heat surging in his chest. He looked at Lin Shi, quietly, yet seriously asking, I suspect that you might be able to become a Braveslayer in the future. Lin Shi immediately became a bit speechless. If it wasn't for Jiang Xiaoyi and himself already meeting a few times in this training valley, he would have definitely suspected that this was someone Su Xingma purposely sent to test him and deduct course points. Your rate of progress is too fast, and you give me an extremely unique feeling. Jiang Xiaoyi looked at the quiet Lin Shi, himself also becoming quiet. He then seriously said, however, I know that even if I am correct, you most likely won't admit it. In reality, the reasoning was something I already understood last time. Because Braveslayers are all heroes, of the 15 Braveslayers that are publicly recorded, only 3 of them haven't sacrificed their lives for our country. What I was thinking back then should be that future heroes are naturally still worthy of my complete adoration and respect. The senior brothers and sisters I admire, Senior Zhou Fulong and the others, are people who I will never have the chance to meet. The vigilance Lin Shi felt completely disappeared. He quietly looked at Jiang Xiaoyi. Even though there were silver threads covering his face, preventing him from seeing Jiang Xiaoyi's eyes, he knew that this student with the rose flower symbol on his chest, definitely had an expression just like his good friend Li Kaiyun, pure, upright, and clean. The reason I found you was also because I wanted to see just how far your strength has developed, see if my judgment is correct or wrong. Jiang Xiaoyi looked at the calm and quiet Lin Shi. He picked up the golden pentagon emblem in front of him, and then with a bit of confusion, he said, however, based on your performance last time, even if you want to return me a favor, you would at most help me defeat an opponent. Why would you directly throw me an emblem? After a bit of hesitation, Lin Shi still honestly replied, because I don't have much soul force left. When I saw you, I decided I might as well not waste any soul force. That way, I can still properly train behind the yellow perimeter walls. What? Do you always train inside there? Jiang Xiaoyi looked at Lin Shi in shock. Lin Shi's expression was a bit strange. I've been going almost every day recently. Why are you so surprised? Jiang Xiaoyi looked at Lin Shi, saying, many of us students have already discussed among ourselves that even though the trials behind those yellow walls are useful, whenever we go all out there, we might have to rest several days before we can recover, unable to even participate in the training valley. However, if we don't go all out, don't become injured, then it won't really bring much benefits, so we came to the conclusion that before our cultivation reached sufficient levels, the benefits received from only being able to face the trial once every few days might not even be comparable to facing other students each day in the training valley, even if we still have the remaining strength to fight a few more opponents, fight a few more battles each day. That is why after we entered once or twice, we all decided to temporarily stop, only going back after we increase our strength a bit more. Lin Shi began to mutter a bit to himself. When he thought about his first miserable experience, only then did he somewhat understand. Towards ordinary students, what Jiang Xiaoyi said was indeed quite reasonable. When he saw Jiang Xiaoyi's clear desire for a reply, after some hesitation, Lin Shi still said, I am a bit special. Jiang Xiaoyi stared blankly for a moment, finding it a bit hard to react in time. However, he then couldn't help but laugh, also tacitly understanding not to ask any more. Instead, he just looked at Lin Shi expectantly, saying, "Can I follow you and take a look? For better or for worse, I'll be able to see how you cultivate, see if I can learn anything. Also, along the way to the yellow perimeter wall, if anyone appears, I can help you to keep them in check, save you the waste of soul force." Lin Shi laughed and said, "Sure, why not?